Hey guys, Jake here from Smith Guitar School. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about some Boss Overdrive pedals. Boss Overdrives, or just Boss pedals in general, are fantastic. They're relatively accessible. You can find them pretty much everywhere. They're, compared to a lot of pedals on the market, they're pretty inexpensive. And they last forever. Their build quality is just fantastic. They're a great value. And they sound great too. Well, one problem that a lot of people have is that since Boss has been around forever, they've been making pedals for a long time, they have a ton of different overdrive pedals. And it can be really difficult to know where to start, especially if you're just kind of getting started, if you're just venturing into the pedal world for the first time. Heck, even if you've been doing this for a while, it can be hard to know the difference between a Mega Distortion and a metal zone. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I have got 6 Boss Overdrives. These are just the 6 overdrive and distortion pedals of theirs that I happen to have on hand. And we're just going to do a quick comparison of them so that hopefully you can get a better idea of which one of these pedals might suit your needs the best. So just a quick note about the setup. I am playing an Ernie Ball Music Man Steve Morse signature. We're running into a Yamaha G100 212. Which is a solid state amp from the 80s. The reason I'm using a solid state amp today is because I know a lot of people play solid state amps, and most of the pedal demos out there on YouTube are on really nice tube amps. So I wanted to give you guys a better idea of how these pedals might sound through your setup. So that's another thing for today. I'm not going to be trying to make these pedals sound like as best as possible. I'm not trying to sell any of these, anything like that. I'm just going to have these kind of just turn the knobs to get a pretty decent sound, but I want you guys to get a good idea of how these might sound through your setup. So for recording purposes, running through a Yamaha G100 212, I'm running into a Torpedo Captor X. I'm using the Rack Hero JP impulse response, which is a Celestion V30 type thing, 212, in case anybody cares. Whatever. So just the clean sound running from the guitar into the amp and through the impulse response sounds like this. Okay. Squeaky clean. So now, so let's take a look at the pedals here. What I have here is the Super Overdrive. I have the Blues Driver. The Blues Driver, by the way, does have the Keeley mod on it. You can see it right there. I'm going to leave that in the down position for the whole time. So essentially it's just a Blues Driver. Then we have the OS2 right here, which is an overdrive / distortion. You can kind of switch between overdrive and distortion or blend between them. Then we have the classic Boss DS1 that most of you guys have probably seen. Then we have the Mega Distortion, the MD2, and we have the Metal Zone. And so I've kind of arranged these basically how I would typically have them on my board. They're mostly from lowest gain to highest gain, with the exception of these two, really. The Super Overdrive and the Blues Driver are similar in amount of gain that they can give, but I like to put the Super Overdrive first because I like to stack them. And I'll give you a quick glimpse at that a little bit later on in the video as well. So for the moment, what I've done is I've just set all the controls at noon, just everything at noon, which of course probably not how I'd actually run them, but I wanted to start it there just to give you an idea. So we're going to start with the Super Overdrive. So the Super Overdrive is a mid-heavy overdrive, think Tube Screamer-ish. And with all the controls at noon, the 3 controls are just level, tone, and gain. Real simple. It's going to sound like this. Pretty good sound right out of the gate, running into just a simple solid state amp. Got a nice tone to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the tone a little bit. And I'll pull the drive up a little bit. All right. We'll see how that sounds. So typically, if I'm using it as an overdrive, that's usually where I like to have it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to crank the gain just so you can see how much it has, and then I'll back the gain off so you can see how it cleans up. So gain all the way up. So you can see not an absolute ton of gain on tap there, right? If you're trying to play Metallica stuff, for example, this is probably not the right one. If you're going for like a Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of thing, pretty sweet, you know? That'll work for that. All right, so we'll back off the gain a bit. Sorry, back the drive down a little bit, and it sounds like this. A nice sound to it. Just like kind of a hint of breakup kind of thing. So here's a clean sound again. And then Super Overdrive on with the gain backed off. All right, so there we go. Moving along, let's take a look at the Boss Blues driver. The BD2 is the model name for it. I actually use this one a lot as more of like a clean sound thing. So what I generally tend to do is run the drive down and use it as kind of a tone shaper, kind of fill out my clean sound a little bit. So we'll hear how that sounds in a minute. But here it is, just with all the controls at noon. Cool. Pretty transparent, you know, relatively. Here it is with it off again. And back on. Right. So I'll turn the gain way up and back the volume off a smidge too. All right, here's the gain cranked. So probably a little bit more gain on tap than the Super Overdrive, but not a ton. So still, again, you know, if you're going for the Metallica thing, the heavy metal thing, this is probably not, you know, exactly the one you want to go for. This is more of that light to medium overdrive kind of thing. It's a great sound. Now I'll demonstrate what I was talking about before about how I like to use it as a sort of a clean boost type of thing. All the knobs just about there, all kind of pointing relatively in the same direction. I'll switch back to the neck pickup here. Again, with it off, here's the basic clean sound, just guitar and amp. And then with the pedal on. So it just sort of gives those single notes a little bit of bloom to them, just a little bit more kind of a little more filled out, you could say. Keep it simple. Then if I dig into that a little bit, you'll get a little bit of drive. So moving along. Now, the OS2 is kind of an interesting one, and probably the most important control on this whole pedal here is this one all the way over here to the right. This is the color control. So when the color control is all the way to the left, it's actually more of an overdrive. It actually bears a pretty striking resemblance to the SD1. When the color control is all the way to the right, it's a distortion pedal, and it bears a striking resemblance to the DS1. This one over here. All right, so we're going to start with it in the middle, which is kind of a blend between the two, and then I'll run through the gamut of gain and the color knob through. So again, all controls at noon. Pretty cool sound again, right out of the gate. So I'll turn this all the way to the left. Again, this is going to be more of like an overdrive. Just for comparison, here's that Super Overdrive again with the controls all at noon. And then back to the OS2. Right, pretty similar. So now I'll take that color knob and I'll turn it all the way to the other side. So this is going to be more of that distortion type thing. So you can hear a lot more bass, a lot more treble, and the mid frequencies are kind of scooped. On the overdrive side, it's the other way around. The bass is cut, the treble's cut, and you have a little more of that mid hump, a little bit more mid presence, which is really great if you're playing with a band and you need to find a place to sit in the mix. So that those mid frequencies are really, really important. But again, so here's how it sounds with the distortion side. Kind of, right? Maybe not quite. All right, so that's only with the gain at noon, right? So the gain, there's got a fair amount of gain there. If I turn the gain all the way up, it's called drive on this particular pedal. It's the same thing. Okay. I'll do the same thing with the color knob turned the other way. So here's color knob on the overdrive side and the gain all the way up. So you can hear that much more like kind of nasally type sound. That's those mid frequencies we're talking about. Cool. Put it back in the middle, and then so you're still with the drive all the way up, but the color control is now in the middle. So it's that kind of even blend of that overdrive and distortion thing. Really cool. So that's a great one if you can't quite decide between the SD1 and the DS1, which we're going to get to in just a second. This could be a great option for you. All right, so speaking of the DS1, let's take a look at that. So again, everything at noon. The Boss DS1, the classic orange distortion pedal, probably the most ubiquitous pedal out there, if I had to guess. They're all over the place, and for good reason. They sound great. All right, I'll crank the gain. Now, usually if I have the gain up like that, I'll drop the tone down a little bit. It gets a little bright at those settings, so I like to roll the tone control off a little bit. So I don't know if we're probably not quite in that Metallica quite territory that we mentioned before, but we're starting to get into that level of gain. We've got quite a bit of gain on tap there. If I roll the gain back, it's going to get this kind of sound. So just a quick comparison. Here it is with just a clean sound again. And then with that DS1 on, but the gain rolled back. All right, so there you go, classic. All right, moving along, the Mega Distortion, the MD2. So the Mega Distortion is really fascinating. It's got more controls on it than any of the other pedals that we've seen so far. It just has the 4 knobs, but one of them is what's called the dual concentric pot, which means that one basically means there's 2 knobs stacked on top of each other. Right? That's this one right here. So there's a tone control and a bottom control, which is essentially a bass control. So we have level, we have the tone and bottom, and then we have gain, and there's a gain boost knob. So I do have everything at noon at the moment. So we'll just give a quick listen to how that sounds, and then we'll take a look at that gain boost and see what that does. So here it is. Cool. All right, Now I'm gonna dump the gain boost all the way down. All right, and we'll hear what that does. So you hear that the quality of the gain is pretty similar, even when I have the gain boost off. So the gain boost doesn't affect the tone or anything of the distortion. It's just going to add a little bit more of it. So if I play some power chords and then I'll turn that gain boost up, just adds a little bit more. Kind of a relatively subtle effect, really. All the way down. Now I'll crank it. Really great for lead stuff. We'll take the drive all the way up. I've got the gain boost halfway at the moment. Almost gets a little fuzzy. It's almost starting to get fuzzy at that point. Okay. Again, a little bit of lead stuff. I'll switch to the neck pickup. All right, and lastly, the metal zone. Okay, now the metal zone is going to be a little bit louder than the others. So as promised, I have the volume control at noon, but once you can hear the level difference, I'll probably back it off a smidge. So again, clean sound just for reference, and then the metal zone. Back it off a smidge. Now, so the metal zone. It's kind of hard to say which of these two, between the metal zone and the mega distortion, which one has more gain. They're kind of similar, but the gain type is very different, and the EQ is very different. So they don't really sound all that similar, even though the level of gain might be in the same ballpark. So the metal zone does have a rather nasally mid-range kind of quality to it. The joke you often hear is that it sounds like a beehive, right? And yeah, I kind of agree. Now, any of you guys that have had metal zones before, I'm just waiting for the comments below that, hey, it sounds better as a preamp right into the effects loop. Not doing that today because a lot of people don't have effects loops on their amp, especially if you're playing a less expensive solid state amp. You may not have one. So we're going to run it into the front of the amp today. But thank you for your comments. I hear you. I'm aware. And we'll definitely try that out at some point in the future. Okay, so the EQ controls on the metal zone are really, really sensitive, and there's a lot of them. So let's take a quick look. We have the level control all the way over here, and then we actually have two dual concentric pots. And so one of those is for the treble and the bass, very similar to what's on the mega distortion. Then the other one is the mid-range control, and this is really the most, probably the most important one out of all of those. So the one of them is to determine what the mid frequency is, and then the other is to determine how much of the mid-range is actually present. It's really, really sensitive. So if I was to I'll just play on an open E here. So I'd probably start somewhere around there. If I'm playing a metal zone, I probably want to scoop those mids just a little bit. And so if I do have some power chords with it in that position. All right. So now, we're starting to get a little bit more into that heavy metal kind of thing. Right, kind of into that type of thing, or if you want to think like, getting more towards that type of sound. I'll crank the gain all the way up so you guys can see how much gain we can get. Again, that's only the gain at halfway, by the way. So there is a ton of gain on tap with this pedal. So cranking it all the way up. You know, it's great if you want to get those pinch harmonics. It's great for that kind of thing. If we wanted to boost the bass a little bit, we'd get a little bit more thump. I'll crank that up so you can hear. Ooh, too much. Too much bass. Back that off. You get, just for comparison, if we turn it way down, it's probably not going to sound great. Wow, does that sound wimpy? Cool. I'll put the bass back up around noon. All right, and so there we go. So there's just a quick run through of the basic sounds of all of them. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better idea. If you're only going to get one of these, which one might be best suited to kind of fit your needs. So if you're looking for something that's just a real simple overdrive, give you a little bit of a mid-range hump, and that'll fit with a band really well, that Super Overdrive is a great choice for that. If you're looking for something to boost your clean tone a little bit and maybe give you some medium type distortion as you get into the higher ranges, Blues Driver. If you want something with a little bit more versatility, if you can't decide between the Distortion or the Overdrive, the OS2, it's awesome. Boss DS1, the orange one up there, just great if you're just looking for a straight ahead distortion pedal. The Mega Distortion is probably the one that I use the most. I use that for any of the kind of heavier rock kind of thing. It's similar in gain to the Metal Zone, but I personally prefer the EQ on that one a little bit more, especially for like the classic rock, maybe 70s and 80s type rock. And it's got a little bit more gain on tap than the DS1 does, just because it has that gain boost. And then of course the Metal Zone still has got, it's definitely got its own thing going on. It's a really cool sound. I use it quite a lot if I'm doing any of that heavier type stuff. So now I just wanted to stack a couple of these together. I'll show you a couple of my favorite stacking combinations. So stacking overdrives is where you take more than one overdrive, you play them at the same time. All right. And usually my overdrive stacking tends to include these two guys here, the ST1 and the Blues Driver, BD2. So what I like to do, turn the Metal Zone off for this. So here's my Blues Driver. Just a little bit of gain from there, and then I can boost that with the SD1. So now I've got those two going together. So this is great if I want to have a nice, maybe I want to have a nice light overdrive for like my my verses, for example. Let's say I'm just doing like a. To a higher gain sound for a solo or a chorus or whatever, I can kick on the SD1, and that will kind of combine with the Blues Driver. So now I can do. For instance, if I crank the gain up on the Blues Driver a little bit more, turn the level down a little bit to compensate. So here's the Blues Driver. Nice gain sound by itself, and then I can kick this up. Plenty of gain on tap there, especially if you want to do any of like your, any of that kind of stuff, you got plenty of gain for that. If you're doing something with a lot of sustain. Awesome for that kind of thing as well. All right. So another one that I like to do a lot of times I'll have the lower gain sound on the Blues Driver, and that will kind of feed into one of my higher gain pedals. So it sort of gives the higher gain pedal something to sit on top of, if that makes sense. So it's not completely sitting on top of a totally clean signal. There's a little bit of overdrive for it to kind of mesh with. So we'll take the DS1, all right? And then if I hit this blues driver to go along with it, okay, one more time, no blues driver. And then with the blues driver. So to me, this works especially well if I'm doing some lead stuff, a little further up the neck maybe. So here's the just the DS1. And with the blues driver. Gives it a little bit more sustain. There we go. I'll do the same kind of thing with the mega distortion. I think we got an idea. So again, here's just the just the mega distortion. Sounds like this. And then with the blues driver. Yeah, again, subtle, but just gives it a little bit more sustain, a little bit more compression. Might be one of those things I can feel a little bit more under the fingers rather than having it come through quite so much. But it's makes it feel a little bit more supported to me. So there you go. Those are a couple of my favorites. Real quick, the metal. Why not the metal zone with the ST1? So here's the metal zone, and then I'll oftentimes use the ST1 along with it. Great for lead stuff. Again, if you're doing like a right, tons and tons and tons of sustain there. So if I scoop out a little bit of the mids on the metal zone, that makes some room for some of the mids from the SD1. So kind of they mesh together pretty nicely. At least I think so. Again, mostly for lead stuff, not too much. Usually, I find if I do that with the rhythm tone, it gets a little too gainy, a little too boomy. But for lead stuff, with a lot of sustain, it's awesome. And if you're doing any other tapping stuff, again, it's perfect. Great for that kind of thing as well. So that's it, guys. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. If you got any videos you'd like to see me do in the future, if you got any other Boss pedals you want to see me review, like I said, leave it down in the comments, and I'll see what we can do. Thanks a lot for sticking with me through the whole thing, and thanks for watching. See you guys soon.